This is Detoxicity, a podcast by men, about men, and for everyone. Hope I said that right. I am the creator and host of Detoxicity, producer, janitor, all that stuff. I've been doing this since 2020. I've recorded about a dozen of these boilers, and the mission has remained the same throughout to provide a safe space for men to talk about vulnerability, emotions, life, not life, art, creativity, sexuality, all of these things that subvert the manosphere that is sort of grown in popularity over the last couple of years. So this is your anti-Rogan podcast, and also just to provide a space that guys don't often get in the quote unquote real world. Like the idea of people being vulnerable and having real conversations and getting to know one another is quite antithetical to what traditional masculinity, or what people would have you believe traditional masculinity is about. But stats show, real life shows, that way is not really working. Whether you look at the loneliness epidemic, quote unquote, that's pretty pervasive in this country and in the world, really. Whether you look at suicide rates, a lot of that stuff speaks to us needing more spaces and more opportunities for vulnerability and more opportunities to speak honestly with one another. So this is that space. I have had this space since 2020, and I thank you for listening. The episodes are not coming as frequently as they used to, but they're still coming. So don't erase us from your feed yet. Actually, what you can do is recommend this podcast to a friend. Ask your friends, neighbors, colleagues if they'd be interested in being a guest on the podcast. You can spread the love on Patreon if you go to bit.ly/detoxpod plus. You can follow me on Instagram at DetoxPodGuy. All of that stuff will help support Detoxicity's mission and ultimately result in more guests, more episodes, all of that stuff. Anyway, I hope you enjoy this latest episode, and make sure you're taking care of yourself and taking care of one another. So, how did this episode come about? Well, there were two things at play. One is my friend Thomas Acox, who you heard on a DetoxPod episode a couple months back. Thomas and I have been friends for a number of years. We've spent a lot of our time together in bars, and one of those bars is Bierwax, which is located in the Prospect Heights section of Brooklyn. It is a bar that has been open since 2017. It combines craft beer with vinyl, two things that are extremely Brooklyn, and it's a cool space. I don't drink beer anymore, but I still go. And on one of those trips, I took a picture because I was with my buddies Kevin and Tom from Boston. They came down to help me out moving, and we had a couple of drinks at Bierwax, snapped a picture. Thomas saw it, and that led to a conversation, and ultimately led to me being introduced to Chris Maestro, the gentleman that founded and owns Bierwax. And this is our conversation that came as a result of all of those little things. It's crazy how connections are made, right? The friend of a friend of a friend thing can lead to some really great things. And this conversation was so much fun to have because, or at least in part because, Chris and I have so much in common. Growing up in New York City, being a child of immigrants. Actually, Chris's dad and my dad literally come from the same town. It's pretty incredible. At any rate, Chris talks about Bierwax and why he opened it, and the challenges that he now faces as a result of being a business owner. We talk about his upbringing, growing up going to Catholic school, growing up in an environment where a lot of the people he interacted with were different from him ethnically. We talk about the fact that he's a girl dad. There's so much stuff in this conversation, and it was so much fun to have. And I'm already saying I want him back for a second one. So I hope you really enjoy this, enjoy listening to it as much as I enjoyed having it. I am very excited to welcome Chris Maestro to the show. Is I like having my guests kind of do their own intro, and talk about themselves and who they are, and then we just keep the conversation going from there. So I'll let you get started and talk about who you are, what you do,
Great,
and we can move from there.
great. I'm Chris Maestro I guess people know me primarily as the founder and owner of Bierwax, vinyl record bar, craft beer bar in Brooklyn, Vanderbilt Avenue, one of the first listening rooms in the United States. But I'm also, child of immigrants, born and raised in New York City. I was born in Astoria, Queens, eventually moved to Flushing, spent a lot of time in Brooklyn. But I'm also, obviously I'm an avid record collector, DJ, producer, former educator. I used to teach history both in Brooklyn and the South Bronx,
Wow.
and fell in love with craft beer along the way, and decided I wanted to marry my two passions, and that's how that's a whole long story of how Bierwax was born. But in terms of who I am, I'm a proud husband and father to twin daughters who are 14 now. And
Wow.
and a dog who's barking like crazy. I'm gonna close this window.
All good. All good. So people obviously will want to know how beer wax even became like an idea in your head. Like, how did the idea to create a space where people could listen to music and that was very like music centric and vinyl centric, and in beer wax's case, hip hop centric? How did a place like that within like a bar framework, like how did that idea even come into your head?
I think there were a lot of different connections and moments, along my journey where the idea seeds were planted of the idea. And I probably even during those moments, I didn't even realize like this eventually would be my path. But for one, I'll start with I was blessed to have one of those rent stabilized studios in a luxury building in Manhattan for 10 years.
Okay.
So my mother urged me, I was in my early 20s. She's like, oh, you should you know, try to apply to one of these luxury buildings. It's rent stabilized. You might get it's like a lottery thing. I said, mom, I'll never get one of those. I don't. And literally, she urged me. She kept bothering me, so I applied. I didn't think I was going to get it. A year later, I got a letter in the mail saying that you won the lotto in the housing lottery, but it doesn't guarantee you an apartment. But I was able to actually get it and had this great bachelor pad in my 20s on 26th Street and 7th Avenue in Chelsea,
Damn. All right.
and dormant buildings. I had friends, that I knew from the hood. It was coming, like, wait, this is where you live? Like, what? So it was a blessing, but that became like the hangout. That was kind of the pregame spot in our 20s for me and my boys. We'd go, someone would get a bottle of whatever, bottle of Bacardi or something, and we, you know, they'd always get on me because I would never have ice. So,
Ha!
you know, and it's like, damn, my show doesn't have ice again. But it was, and then at the time I was also, I was DJing, I was making beats. So I would either spin records or I was playing the beats that I had worked on that week. And my friends were also, some of them were officially rappers, others were just pretty good at freestyling, and I was pretty terrible. But we would all have a session over, drinks and my music. And it just became a tradition where that was the hangout place. And so you're coming into a room filled with records with music and we're drinking. And I was like, oh, this feels good. This is really cool. But again, that was in my 20s. Around that same time when I got into craft beer, I took a trip to Hong Kong to visit a friend. And this story I've told a few times, but so it's apologies to anyone who has heard it. But we were smoking cigars in this cigar lounge in Hong Kong, and he's like, "Oh, you have to try this beer called Summy Klaus." And at the time, I just knew Heineken, Red Stripe, Coronas, like that. That's what I drank.
The
If I,
typical, yeah.
so and I was like, this Austrian beer was I couldn't even pronounce it. But then the crazy thing was that it was 14.5% alcohol by volume. It was very
Damn.
strong.
Yeah.
And on the side of the label, it said the strongest beer in the world. So it actually said that. And I believe at the time that was, if not the strongest, one of the strongest. So we had two of them, and I was so buzzed, especially, smoking a cigar already get you lightheaded, and having this strong AF beer. And it was a revelation to me. I was like, yo, I've never the fact that I had two, and it was the same size as it was a 12-ounce bottle. It was the same size as a Heineken or Corona. And I was like, wow, like I have a strong buzz and I've never tasted a beer like this in my whole life because it was an Austrian beer. It was a Doppelbock, so it was a style that I had never had before. And I went back to the States on a mission to find that particular beer. So I was going around just researching, bottle shops and European beer bars, and I couldn't find it. But a lot of the bartenders, if they were a good bartender, were like, "Oh well, I don't have that beer, but why don't you try this?" So then it just became like a moment of discovery of all these beers. Many of them were Belgian, because this was earlier than a lot of the kind of the explosion of craft beer in New York State
Hmm.
was just getting started. So yeah, so that put me on. That was another pivotal moment of being in Hong Kong, smoking those cigars, trying that new beer. But then I would say the other important moment was being in Amsterdam at a bar called Cafe Duvel. I don't know if I pronounced it right, but it's like devil in Dutch.
In Dutch, okay.
And it was my friend researched it. He's like, it's a hip hop bar. We have to go there. And I was blown away because this was a time and a moment in New York City when, and even including myself, most DJs were using Serato.
Hmm.
So everyone was spinning, digital, whether it was CDJs or it was still turntables, but you still had your laptop, right? But so there was a DJ spinning all wax. It was all vinyl. But it was more than that. It was all like underground hip hop from the States. We're talking about like Little Brother, Mos Def, Talib, groups like that, and artists like that. And those Europeans knew the words verbatim, like they
Every
were singing,
song.
rapping along.
Hmm.
And I was just bugging out. Like the appreciation for our art form was so intense in another country in
It's
Europe
crazy.
amongst all these white folks.
Yeah.
And I was like, why doesn't this exist in New York, where I live, the home of hip hop, the birthplace of hip hop. And that was another important moment of me of just like trying to understand like what is my purpose. And then years later, I kind of realized what has been one of the biggest things that I've ever done in my life. And then eventually Bierwax was born. And there's other obviously twists and turns in that story, but those were kind of the very important moments and those seeds that were planted.
I love that. And you've created such a destination. Like my homeboy Kevin lives in Boston and he came up in January and he was like, yo, we got to go to Bierwax.
Mm,
Like there's people who come to New York and like you have like a legend now, kind of, which, as someone who shares a lot of cultural touch points with you, like I certainly appreciate. But I want to take it back now and let's talk about little Chris,
mm,
because I do think you and I have a few things in common there where, you know, children of immigrants. I'm going to go out on a limb and assume you're of West Indian descent.
yes.
Right? There you
Yep.
go.
Yep.
I grew up in Brooklyn. You grew up in Queens. I feel like we're probably about the same age. So, what is like your origin story? Like, what was
Mm-hmm.
growing up in New York City like for you?
Yeah. So my father's Guyanese.
My father's also Guyanese.
Damn, okay. So father's from Georgetown, Guyana, and my mother's Dominican. So, and people often wonder, like, how did a Dominican woman and a Guyanese man get married in the first place? And their story is that they met at some 70s house party and, friends, mutual friends, they were all teens hanging out. And my father caught a liking to my mom. She was in boarding school in New Hampshire, out of all places. So it was like a place that, you know, my grandmother got my mother got a scholarship, and my grandmother just said, it's easier if I get this kid out the house or not out the apartment where that she was living probably uptown Manhattan somewhere. And so my mother basically grew up in New Hampshire for all intents and purposes for her formative young years between seventh grade and 11th grade.
Okay.
So she would only come to New York City summertime and when school was not in session to be stay with family. But then started, she's a teenager, so she went to a couple of parties, met my father. Of course, back then they're writing letters to each other, mostly probably him to her, because he was smitten, and she was just kind of like, I wouldn't kind of ambivalent, like whatever, They lost touch. She moved back because her boarding school was actually closed her junior year. She was able to graduate, well, able to finish her junior year, but then had to finish off her final year of high school at Thomas Aquinas in the Bronx.
Hmm.
So she was up in the Bronx and then working in Macy's on 30 in Hevel Square, 34th Street. And my father somehow found out that she was working in Macy's. So homeboy went to every single floor. I'm not, this is how the story goes, right? He went, I think he made a mistake and said, I'm going to go to the top floor and work my way down, which
Down?
I guess is smart gravity wise, right? So, but it turns out she was working in the cellar. So he wasted a lot of time. If he would have started right down in the basement and gone up, it would have been a lot easier.
Been
But
a lot easier.
he found her. He found her. They reconnected, and then they started kind of officially dating. And once my Dominican grandmother found out that she was dating a Guyanese guy, she basically kicked her out of the house. And at that point, she was ready, and she went to Hunter, CUNY Hunter, and basically was like, okay, I'm out then. But she packed her like a one bag and she left. She was like 18 or 19. And she's like, I don't even know where I'm going. She calls a bunch of friends and their friends live with their moms. Like, oh, you can't come over here. So she calls her boyfriend who lived in Astoria. He's like, you can come move in with me. So that was essentially, and I think I was probably born like a year later. So,
Okay. All right.
and I was born in that apartment in Astoria. So, but like the immigrant work ethic, like both of them just hustling, working odd end jobs and saving. And of course, like housing prices back then, like you can get a house for like $30,000
Yeah.
in the 70s. So they saved up enough to put a down payment on a house that was 30, and they bought a house in Flushing, Queens. So that's where I spent the formative years of my life. And at the time, Flushing was predominantly Irish, Italian, Jewish, not Asian, not Korean, not Chinese.
Right.
There was a small little Chinatown there in Main Street, like downtown Main Street, but we're talking about 2 blocks. That's it.
Wow.
And everywhere else was mostly, there was Palmanact, which there was public housing there. There was part of Colden where like Large Professor is from, Mike Geronimo, Royal Flush. So there, there's areas of concentrations where there's mostly people of color, but I grew up in an area that was mostly white folks. And then
Interesting.
I went to Catholic high school. No, excuse me, I went to Catholic elementary school. And I think when I kind of told you some of the things that maybe we can discuss was just even just like, being a black kid in pretty much all white elementary school, Catholic school, and what that was like, right? So that was very, very interesting. And I guess the most telling thing about 8 years in that experience is when I graduated. I actually graduated as a valedictorian
Damn.
because I
Hey,
guess I
Chris.
thank you. It's like something I don't talk about it much, but I guess I threw all that angst into my studies, and I was like,
Studying.
if there's anything that I can control and do well with, I wasn't a jock. I wasn't good at sports. I was definitely at that time in the 7th and 8th grade, I was a metalhead and I was a huge nerd. So I was doing really well in school to the point that I eventually was a valedictorian with another child of immigrants. And her name was Denise Chang. So, which was amazing, right? In the school of white, it was like the 2 kids of immigrant parents that were the valedictorians. But my parents were like, "Don't you want to take pictures with everyone?" I'm like, "No, let's let's go." And my mom was like so confused. She's like, "What do you mean? Like, let's just take." I'm like, "No, mom, I really just want to go home." I was
Okay.
so excited to be graduating and to not have to do anything, to have anything else to do with that school anymore, and that group of kids that I was just so happy to get out of there. So like that was I remember that vividly. That my mother was so shocked that I just didn't want to stay a second longer to take pictures. Yeah. So but yeah, I mean, I was funny because listening to Five Five Freddy on Questlove's podcast because I
Yeah,
just
question.
finished the book.
I finished the book a couple weeks ago too.
Yeah, so we just finished. I have the Hip Hop Book Club, which we can talk about later. But
Yes.
and we that was the book that we read for this past book club meeting, and I just listened to like half of the his podcast with Questlove. And he was just talking about growing up in this New York City, but in I guess late '60s and '70s.
70s. Yeah.
Just talking about some of the games, and I do have a lot of fond memories of just like being a kid in New York City before the age of the internet and social media and all that kind of stuff of like, you come home when the street lights are on and just like playing manhunt and playing, even though I wasn't much of an athlete, there was a lot of street games, right? It was two-hand touch on the street.
Yeah, you were playing Skelly, you were playing
Exactly.
punch ball, you were
Mhm.
playing like all this different stuff. I
Yeah.
mean, yeah, yeah. And that,
So
yeah, that book kind of took me back to,
mhm.
I just turned 50, so I'm a little younger than Freddie. But
Are you 76?
yeah, I'm 76.
So same year too, me and you.
Damn,
Yeah.
we're twinning right now, Chris.
Hey, yeah,
And he also grew up on Hancock Street
yeah,
in Bushwick, or the
and
Bed-Stuy
Bed-Stuy.
side of
Yep.
Hancock Street.
Mhm.
Our family, until I was 3, lived on the Bushwick side of Hancock
Wow.
Street,
Wow. My
and then
wife's
moved
from
to Flatbush.
is from Bushwick. She's from
Okay.
Gates.
All right. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, and Knickerbocker, so she grew up there.
Yeah. But, and highly recommend that book to anybody who's listening who wants something to read.
It's
And
really
it's so,
great.
like, evocative of that time in New York City, pre-internet. Like, you talk to a millennial or a Gen Z person now, and
Mhm.
they're like, "What? Playing games in the street?
Yep.
Throwing a football around when there's traffic
Yep.
driving by, like all that stuff."
Mhm.
And it's crazy to think of how, I mean, times have obviously changed, but New York City has changed so much. And,
Yeah.
we can get to that in a minute, but I want to go back to your experience
Mm.
of being in this environment where, you're going to school and nobody really looks like you.
Yeah. There was, I guess, 3, maybe 3 or 4 other kids of color in the school, and I became close friends with the only other black kid, Ron Spicer, and who was also a metalhead. Ironically, it's crazy because most of the white kids were into house music and freestyle and stuff because that was the time like a lot of the Italian kids, and we're talking about late '80s. So,
Yeah.
and eventually I grew to love all that stuff too. But that was my way of just saying "f you" to everyone else because I wanted to be different, and I was different. So, but I mean, the other to rewind to second grade, and this is a formative story because it's if anyone ever asked me like when did you ever realize that race is a thing and and that you quote unquote are an other in this predominantly white institution, I always know this one story that again is just will or ever be burned into my memory. I was on a bike back then. You jump on a bike, your parents or your mom is like good luck, and, we just rode, like, I can't even imagine my girls, like, at 2nd grade riding, not even, like, once as long as you can see them block to block, that's it. But it was like, I rode on that bike blocks and blocks and blocks and blocks. So, I was riding with my friends, 2nd grade again, we rode past Main Street, so, like, a busy street, and wound up at another friend's house, and then he had a dog, and the dog was barking at me, he's barking, 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 and one kid said, "Oh, Chris, the dog doesn't like you because you're not white." And it never fucking occurred to
Never
me.
occurred to you before that. Wow.
And I was like looking around, looking at myself, looking at them. I jumped on my bike and I didn't even say bye. I just jetted home in tears the whole way. Like it was like one of those moments. I got home crying. My mother's like, "What's wrong?" And I explained the story. My mother eventually, and at the time, she wasn't yet a therapist, but she eventually became a social worker. So I think she was already equipped to have those kind of conversations with her one child. I'm an only child, so she poured everything into me. And in that moment, she just said, "Yeah, you're not white, and but you know, God gave you this beautiful color, and many people want that your color, and you're beautiful as you are, and and kids can be very insensitive and very mean, and but like that was the moment that I was like, oh yeah, I am different from all the other kids in my class and most of the kids in my school.
And did that change the way that you move through your experience, particularly in school?
I think so. I mean, now I know, then there was definitely other times where, get called the N-word and get called other all kind of names. And so now there's like getting used to like, okay, now I am an other and I am going to be exposed to a lot of people's hate and ignorance. So yeah, it definitely was the beginning of just knowing like, "Oh, okay, this is going to be a different and more challenging experience than I had anticipated." And a lot of that changed in high school because I was able, there was quadruple the number of kids in the school. So yeah, I can choose my tribe and I can make friends with folks that look more like me. So high school was an incredible experience. It's still Catholic high school. I went to St. Francis Prep, but I had a great community of people around me, and still have some friends to this day from prep.
That's
But
dope.
yeah, but you know, I often think about those early years, and I think those experiences led me to becoming, eventually a history teacher, because I felt like once I started learning about history and learning about, you know, race, class, gender, sexuality, and all the things that really are the underpinnings of society and how people
Hmm.
move and how historical events happen. I started realizing like, oh, like this is exactly why I had this experience growing up in terms of power, in terms of race, in terms of class. And I was like, yeah, I think I want to teach history and try to like get other young people to understand these things too. So that kind of definitely unknowingly led me into a career of education.
Nice. So, was education like your college major? Did you initially set out to be a teacher, or was it
No, I
something you
didn't.
kind of fell into? Okay.
I actually fell into it because the girlfriend I was dating was a history major at the time. And I didn't know what to choose. I was really, because I was so into music. I really wanted to choose music as at least a minor, but like a punk, I was scared of theory. You know,
Man, theory
yeah,
is no joke.
it is no joke. And I was like, I don't know. And I think I dropped a theory class. I was like, oh yeah. And then history, I took a few history classes that I really liked, and she was history major. I was like, oh, I guess I'll choose history. And then teaching also kind of just happened because I didn't know what else to do with a history major. So, and then I started subbing at a elementary school, and I realized like I do not want to teach like second graders. And eventually, I found my way into high school, and I was supposed to be maybe a couple of days subbing for a teacher that just literally quit, and they liked me, and I stayed on for 3 years in that school, and eventually that became the early part of my career.
Sure. Right
Yeah.
on. All right. Switching gears again, music is such an important part of your life. And you talked about being a metalhead as a kid, which is really interesting to me because given the environment you were in, my brain immediately went to, okay, he became a metalhead because that's what the kids in his environment were listening to. But you
Mm,
say that the kids in your environment were not listening to metal, they were listening to like, which makes sense. Like a kid growing up in Queens in the late 80s and early 90s is going to be listening to freestyle and house and hip hop most likely.
yeah, yeah.
So what drove you to metal? And then from there, what drove you to hip hop?
Those are both great questions. I think honestly, metal, it was a very slow process, and a lot of it was, I think, MTV, and it was like the early MTV days, and like some of those early videos of like, and I don't even consider it metal. It's just like Guns N' Roses and
Yeah.
Poison and Def Leppard and that kind of stuff that I really got into in the beginning.
All the hair metal.
Yeah, exactly. And then I just gravitated towards that, and then slowly got into a little heavier stuff, and then found my way towards Metallica, which then was like my favorite group of all time for many, many years. And then anything similar to that, Anthrax, Testament, Slayer, sort of. I was a little scared of Slayer. But so, because I was hardcore Catholic at the same time, which was wild crazy.
Yeah, that's crazy.
There was like the juxtaposition of someone into heavy metal, into like dark music, and reading the Bible at night. I used to I think my mother thought it was strange because I was more religious than her. I would listen to like a Bible study thing on a radio show. I forgot about this until just now. I would tune into this show on a radio station that would talk about the Bible, and then I would read like a chapter a night. I read the whole Bible like when I was like before the 8th grade.
Whoa.
The whole
Okay. So
thing, the
yeah,
whole
you were
thing.
you were very serious.
I was very serious, and I even felt the calling to become a priest at one time.
Interesting.
And and the crazy thing was it was the same exact time that I was playing guitar, playing thrash metal, learning how to solo, and into Metallica, and to all those other thrash bands, but so also into, and I was so guilted into the fact that I was listening to all this stuff that I threw away my Metallica albums twice. I literally threw them in the garbage, like, for Jesus. So,
Yeah,
yeah.
we was like,
And then I couldn't go without them for 2 weeks. I was like literally I was fiending, and then I would save my allowance, I would go buy them again.
Wow, that's
All 4 of the
crazy.
first albums, which are like the best ones, but so yeah, it was an interesting time in my life.
That's crazy. I've never known. So you had mentioned Questlove earlier, and I'm thinking of the story he's told in his book and a couple other times where like his dad was super Christian. So you know, if Amir bought like a Prince record,
Yeah.
his pops would like break it or throw it out or
Yeah,
whatever.
yeah.
So I've heard of other people throwing
Mhm.
out their kids' records. I've never heard about the kid throwing out
For
their own
themselves,
records.
exactly.
All right. That's like giving yourself an ass whooping.
Right. I mean, I think Catholics are known for that, self-flagellation, right?
Relation. Yes. Yes, you are correct. Very correct.
That's my own version.
Yes. Wow.
Wow,
Man,
yeah, this is you listen, I've been on a few podcasts. This is the first ever that I've talked about some of this stuff. This is wild.
got an exclusive. So I
Also,
guess,
yeah, I know the other question was, how did I
yeah,
get into hip
hip
hop?
hop. Yeah.
And I can trace the moment. A lot of it too is this transition between a shedding of the layers and a shedding of my identity and of of the trauma of like elementary school of trying to be reborn as a new person. And when I got into ninth grade, when I went, it was a whole new school. I still had that kind of metal look, and I was still who I was in eighth grade. And I remember one of my classmates, who was a year older than me, was like, "Chris, you're never gonna get girls if you got a mullet like that." And I was like, "Oh shit, I think he's right." So I literally got a haircut that same week, and it changed up the whole style. But I wasn't into like hip hop or anything. I just knew I had to change how I looked. And then there's a kid named Brian Flynn, who's half Irish, half Puerto Rican. And we got cool and we were started hanging out. And he was like, yo, you're not into hip hop? I'm like, no, not really. He's like, let me show you some videos. And he used to tape stuff off of Video Music Box, Ralph McDaniels. And I used to tune in a little bit when I was younger too, just to like dabble a little bit
Okay.
in Channel 31. It was on back then.
Yes, sir.
And so like I was aware, but I wasn't like super into it. But like so he would show me all these videos, and I remember like seeing the early like BDP videos, early like De La videos, NWA was out,
Yeah, man.
and there was like, especially between like some of the aggressive NWA stuff and metal, there was a synergy. There was like still
Hmm.
that rebellious nature, the fuck the police and a lot of the metal that I listened to, like it was very topical, it was very thematic.
Hmm.
You know, Metallica was talking about everything from like war to mental institutions to suicide. So like all these things, like every song was about something. And I would listen to the lyrics and I was like, it started to inform some of my own like viewpoints on things. So when I realized that, oh, there's this other genre that talks about shit too, it was an easy way to get into hip hop. And especially at the time, I remember also there was the Stop the Violence song, Self
Self
Destruction.
destruction. Yep.
Yeah. And I
Yep.
remember the video for that too. He was on that same videotape. He lent me, or I think he dubbed me some of those videotapes. So I started watching them at home and getting into it. And I remember, oh, damn, I wish I had those tapes still. And I might, because I'm not a hoarder, but I'm a collector.
Pack
I
rat.
mean, yeah, depends
We'll
who you
find
ask.
a nice term to throw in the middle
Yeah,
there.
I might have a box of those VHS tapes still, but yeah, I accredit it to Brian Flynn and just like really just all of a sudden it just became like my eyes were open to hip hop, particularly around the lyrics. And it was also a great time to get into hip hop.
Yeah.
It was like 1990 exactly. So there was so much great music being released.
Right in the middle of the golden era
Yeah.
of hip hop,
Yeah.
you
So
know.
and then, I some of my first summer jobs, I was working at SYEP, some youth employment.
Shout
And
out Summer Youth.
yes, that's my first summer job, and those I was minimum wage was $4.25 an hour, and the check for a week was like $80, but I would go to Tower Records and buy whatever amount and I would go to the check cashing first, so I was no bank account back then for me. I
No.
would go to check cashing, I would get maybe $70 because they would take 10, and then I would go across the street and get maybe what could afford 3 or 4 CDs, and I'd even sometimes it was like, damn, this one wasn't so good. It's like Redhead Kingpin.
Mhm.
I was like, oh, this one's okay. But then I was like, I had special ed. and that one was great. So, and then back then there wasn't that much music. Like now it's so
It's
there's
flooded.
flooded, like with streaming and there's some artists like if you're into like Griselda stuff, like they release like 5 albums a year,
Yeah,
and that's
yeah,
and maybe even more. So it's like
yeah.
you can't keep up.
If back in the day, if you were lucky, you got one album a
Yep.
year
Yeah.
by, your favorite artist. Usually it's
Exactly.
once every 2 years.
Yeah.
But yeah, the market is A, flooded with art with, creators and artists,
Hmm.
and B, artists release records on a more frequent level. So
Right.
it's just like it's overwhelming.
It's very overwhelming. So
Yeah.
that then you get to know that record so well,
Yeah.
and then I would if it was a song that I liked, I would stop it, rewind it, write down the lyrics. So I would have notebooks of the lyrics. So like, especially I Got It Made, Getting
Huh.
Started, Just to Get It Rep. Like those songs I still know to this day, like by heart, because I wrote all the lyrics down.
The similarity in experiences is like crazy right now. And I'm loving this because like I'm understanding everything you're throwing down from, video music box, summer youth, standing at check cash in place,
Hmm.
all that's like, I mean, and I think also because we're the same age, we
Yeah,
did these things at the same time.
that's wild. Our
So
mutual friend Thomas did it. He said like, "Oh, you guys will hit it off, and you guys are probably the same." Like he didn't realize we are the same
we are
age.
exactly the same age. Yeah. Yeah. That's insane. And it's really interesting because I don't know if I ever really thought of the similarities between, kind of the hard rock metal at the time and hip hop. I mean, they're both kind of like aggressive, masculine type
Yeah,
of music. But back in the day, even like Axl Rose said his favorite group was NWA. So, there was definitely you would think that those 2 genres would have
mm,
very different audiences,
mm,
but a lot of times they didn't. Like Rage Against the Machine doesn't get created
yep,
unless, Tom
hmm,
and Zach are listening to Public Enemy
yep,
and Metallica at the same time,
exactly, yep.
you
Then you
know?
had, the I think Public Enemy also did something with Anthrax,
Anthrax, right.
right? And, of course, Aerosmith, and Run
And Run DMC,
DMC.
you
So,
had Beastie
there's
Boys and Kerry King and
yep,
like all this
yep.
stuff. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah.
And
So
it's funny because the Beastie Boys' "License to Ill" was the first record that I had it on cassette tape that I knew front to back. So that was one of those that, like, it was so popular amongst my classmates that I was like, "Oh, let me get this too," and then it was just it seemed subversive at the time for someone in the 4th grade,
right. Oh, yeah.
so, yeah, so that was one that I remember, and then I also in terms of early that even though I was a metalhead, there were moments that I remember liking hip hop early. I remember my parents took me to see Beat Street, in the theaters. So I was like, I remember that as like, holy cow, like, this is really cool. And I remember trying to like backspin in my basement, on the little cardboard and I actually could. That's the one thing I was never any kind of b boy in any way, but I used to do a pretty mean backspin though.
Okay.
Yeah.
Alright. Ain't trying that shit now though. Heard something. Um, I'm curious where you stand as far as like your faith now, like going
Mm.
to Catholic school all this time. Like, how does that how is that translated over the years?
Yeah, so it's REM song, right? Losing My Religion. So
Religion. Mm,
yeah. I was going I realized I was going to church even in college for the first year. And then I think once I was politicized and kind of there was like a whole almost like a veil was lifted, right? Where I
mm.
started seeing the world through a whole different lens that I was like, oh yeah, F this. I'm not going to church anymore. But in that same time frame in high school, I actually got really into Eastern philosophy. I was going to the library and I started just taking out books on like Taoism and Buddhism. And I just had like a hunger for other ways of seeing the world and seeing life and seeing the universe. And so like there was also a moment, no, not even say a moment of time. To this day, I'm more of a Buddhist than anything else. I don't necessarily say that that's my religion, but if there's a faith that I really believe in, it would be Buddhism. And I have another teacher that I read a lot of his books, which is Eckhart Tolle, and I've read his books like 3 or 4 times over. And
Okay.
he also informs a lot of what I believe in addition to Buddhism.
I love that. I love that. I mean, there's certainly a lot to be said for Buddhist philosophy. and being open to just the idea of spirituality not being one thing,
Yeah. Yeah. Hmm.
so I definitely appreciate and respect that. Now, in terms of music, obviously Beerwax is very hip hop centric. You came up as a metalhead. There are a million other genres of music in the world. When you are outside the bar, are you still like a music head? You're a record head, you're a vinyl head. Like, is it still like a diverse kind of thing, or once you went hip hop, you went hip hop, and that was it?
Now, it's hip hop led me to so many other genres because I wanted to participate in hip hop at a certain point. And I didn't know what I wanted to do, but I gravitated towards production. And in college, he wasn't necessarily my college roommate, but he lived right across the hall from me.
Okay,
It was second year we moved out, or the third year we moved outside of campus, and we had an apartment. So he was literally the right next door, and he would leave his door open, and he was, I think I was also didn't know boundaries so well. So I would literally sneak into his room and I would turn his computer on and I would make beats. So he would come home from class like, "What are you doing in here?" And I'm like, just making it. Hey, listen to this. I just made this. So like, he taught me how to loop up samples and like then find drums and like make it the same time so I can like add the drums to the sample. And so it was a very rudimentary way of making beats, but it was like using Cool Edit. And but I started making beats when I was like 19. And that was like the biggest passion after playing guitar was like becoming a beat maker. And like any beat maker, the the true way of making beats is you have to sample vinyl. So around that same time, I in the student union at Binghamton where I went, there was a vinyl fair, and it was the local radio station was just I guess they were converting to digital, so they were selling. Oh, they had a huge jazz collection.
man.
$3 a record, and they're talking about, like, Wes Montgomery, Horace Silver, Sonny Rollins, like, all the greats, and I didn't I was a broke college kid, so I bought maybe 4 or 5 at most, but then I was like that was the beginning of my record collection, like, my own collection, and then at that point, I didn't even have a turntable. I had I think I went to Radio Shack and got like a messed up turntable to be able to at least sample it. But so the DJing didn't happen until I graduated and I was teaching and I had some money in my pocket to be able to go to Canal Street and buy one turntable and then eventually get a mixer and then I get because I was making a teacher salary. So,
Right. Not a
so it
whole lot
took,
of money.
no, so it took time to eventually get my gear up but once I had, two turntables and a mixer, and I had already the records, and God bless my brother from another mother, Fernando Reels, who also had a radio station. Well, he had a radio station in Binghamton, and people were sending him a lot of indie hip hop. So like all these labels from anything that was through Fat Beats, anything that was on Fondulum, like all these, they were just sending him stuff. That when he was not doing that radio station anymore, he's like, "I know you're really into this record stuff. Here, do you want these records?" So then I got even more records, and then once I started collecting, if I had a lead, like, "Oh, my grandmother has records in the basement. She doesn't want it anymore. What's her address? I'm going there." So, like, it just became an obsession, and it was more because it's like, there might be samples in there. So, it was any genre, right? So, anything from rock to jazz to soul, funk, Latin, show tunes, didn't matter. I was like, I could go through and find something. So, my ear got trained to pretty much like everything except country music. I don't fuck
I
with
mean,
country.
which is interesting because, you know, speaking from my own experience, West Indian folks
Mm,
generally have a love for country music.
that's funny.
Yeah.
My father was into yacht rock.
Okay. So he was messing with like Doobie Brothers or like
Doobie
James
Brothers,
Taylor or.
James Taylor, Steely
All
Dan,
right.
Christopher Cross, like all that kind of stuff.
All
So I
right.
have a very soft spot for yacht. I mean, back then it wasn't even
Same.
called yacht rock, but
Yacht
yeah,
rock. Yeah.
yeah. So, but that's a tangent. But yeah, so I like everything. I have even though I don't speak Spanish fluently, I have a very deep appreciation for like 70s salsa and like Fania and that whole era. So I have a really deep collection with that stuff. But then a lot of our DJs have gotten me into 45 collecting. So now that's a whole new territory. So I've been collecting 45s now. So,
Bro,
it's
like,
like,
where do you put all this stuff?
The 45s have a special place in like this strange little cupboard that we cleared. I used to have china, and my wife was like, "Just put your 45 boxes in there." So I have like 10 boxes stacked in this little strain. It's like a little secret thing. So it's
I love the supportive spouse.
yes, who has been hugely supportive from day one because Bierwax would not have been open. She is the co-founder and co-owner without her believing the vision and being like, I'm going to hold down the 9 to 5, the insurance while you focus on this passion project. And the passion project is now the main thing that's making the money for the family. Not quite enough, but we've been now going on 9 years holding it down at on Vanderbilt. So
That's amazing. And I mean, I lived outside of New York for a couple years and I came back in 2015. So I've been back a little over 10 years. And PLG, which is where you are, or where Bierwax is a really interesting kind of like cross section.
mm,
So I would imagine you get like a super diverse client. I mean, I've been in Bierwax. I know what
yep,
kind of clientele you get.
yep.
But on a regular, I would imagine you get like a pretty diverse clientele because that neighborhood, like it's sort of like my neighborhood as well. I live in Flatbush,
Hmm.
where it's like the hood is still there, but money has moved in. It
Hmm.
is gentrified to a certain extent. So I'm just curious, like you've seen the evolution over the last like 9 years, and
Yeah.
also you're a New Yorker, like you've lived here for 50 years, like you've seen the
Yep.
evolution in New York City
Yep.
from 1976 until now,
Hmm.
and I think a lot of people who grew up here have kind of conflicted feelings about that because there's always a sense that there's the old New York and you miss it, and
Mm.
now it's too expensive to live in and all that stuff. But as a business owner and as a New Yorker, just like how do you feel about all the changes that have happened?
Yeah, it's tough. Like it's interesting because when we the theme of beer wax, right? If from the outside looking in, when when we were about to open shop. At this point, it was 2017. We had the butcher paper on the windows, and I think we had a little sign that said, craft beer and vinyl. And I remember someone in the message board. There was like a community message board saying, like, "Oh, there goes the neighborhood," and it almost seemed like, "Oh yeah, this is a gentrifier moving in. This is this business that's vinyl records and craft beer." Like it reads that. I get it. But if you would have come to Beer Wax on Saturday when it's like Large Professor, Evil D, mostly brown and black folks dancing in the street for the block party, like that is also Beer Wax, right? We've created what's become a real institution for old New York and for new New York, folks that are into craft beer that had just moved to the very expensive place on the block, high rise, excuse me, to the, to Chino, who's a graffiti writer who lives close by, who's been there forever, decades upon decades, is also a regular. So, we have a cross section of folks that we built Beer Wax for. Part of this whole idea of craft beer being very white and me going to many festivals and being, the only person of color and realizing like, oh, this is a very white space of trying to build something that is not going to be that and with intentionality around that. So, but when you build something that speaks to a lot of different people, like I had a guy that was also celebrating his 50th 2 weekends ago
Shout
from
shout out to
German
all the 76 people.
76. Don Will, shout out to Don Will. I just found out he's
Word.
76 or two.
I didn't know that. I thought John Will
Yeah,
was a lot younger.
I thought so too, but he just
Okay.
celebrated his milestone last week.
I got his newsletter this morning. Shout out Don Will.
So yeah, happy birthday. But yeah, this gentleman was from Germany, a white guy from Germany, and he was coming to Beer Wax was his first stop. He got there at 2 o'clock, right when we opened, and he's like, "I'm sorry, I was hovering, but I this was on my list, and that's the first place I'm visiting." And he's like, "I heard it's a hip hop bar." And we were playing jazz at the time. He's like, "You guys play hip?" I was like, we play everything that gave birth to hip hop, right?" And we just started chopping it up and talking. He was visiting first time in New York, and so his milestone birthday, he's like, "I want to visit the mecca of all the things that he loves." He's a big hip hop fan, and everything from Mobb Deep to Cormega, like he's into hip hop. So he went to Queensbridge, and we were giving him tips about, all right, listen, you got to be respectful. You're not going to just walk into the projects. And so I also invited him to a DJ set that I was doing right around the time of the Bushwick Collective Block Party, which was a couple of weekends ago.
Okay.
And he showed up. He actually made it to the DJ set, and we were playing hip hop, so he was in his glory.
That's dope.
And he showed me pictures of that he ran into some guy that knows some of the instrumental folks in Queensbridge in terms of music and took him on a tour. He was in his car, he's playing music. It was like this guy had such a story, like a storybook experience for his first time in New York that not many people will have, but just all the dots connected just right. And I'm happy that Bierwax was part of that story for him.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's been a blessing. But in terms of like gentrification, the neighborhood changing and New York City changing, I almost feel like I can't believe that I own a business on Vanderbilt. As a former educator, that I didn't have a lot of my own capital. That's a whole long story of how we raised money to build Beerwax and get it off the ground. I think a lot of it was just being very lucky, and it's been an uphill battle since the very beginning. We survived COVID.
Mm.
We have multiple loans still that are COVID era loans that we have to pay back. We're undergoing a New York State sales tax audit, and that's going to be crazy once they give us the bill of what we have to pay back. It's just there's a lot of stuff that we're up against, so it's not peaches and cream, but I still count my blessings, and I know that I'm very lucky. Black kid from New York City that is able to have put a flag in the ground in my own city and have built something that resonates with a lot of people. So, but I'll talk like from my wife's point of view. It was, she grew up in Bushwick, and she saw her neighborhood change dramatically. And a lot of, her family members were priced out of where they lived. But then the irony is then we'd go one of our favorite restaurants was this place called Lodge back in the day in Williamsburg, or maybe it was like the border of Bushwick and Williamsburg, but whatever. And it's like, wow, but this wouldn't have existed 15 years ago. And we're here, but there's a privilege in that, right? Being able to sit there and have like a nice meal in this trendy looking restaurant. But, it sucks because we're gonna be priced out eventually. There's gonna be the clock is ticking for Beer
Ticking.
Wax
Right.
because every year our rent goes up. There's 3% rent escalations every year. We've been there for 9 years. So eventually our rent is gonna be doubled. And what, was great for year two in terms of being able to make a profit and meet all of our expenses is completely different. And we only really sell one thing, which is alcoholic beverages. We don't really have a large kitchen. Where food is not our main thing. It's really beer because it's called beer wax, but we also have cocktails and all that, everything else. But we can't charge $14 for a beer.
Right.
We can't really raise beer that much, but the cost of business is going up across the board and rent. So we are gonna eventually also be priced out along with many other people that just can't afford to live in New York. So it's bittersweet. I have a lot of feelings about it. I have a lot of feelings about being an entrepreneur that literally, is worried about paying my own mortgage.
Right.
People from the outside looking in, you see a guy who owns a bar that seems very busy and just make a lot of assumptions around our own personal finances, but shit is rough.
It's hard out there for a lot of folks.
Yeah.
It's kind of just the reality of the world we're living in right now, and it's an unfortunate reality.
Hmm. Hmm.
But I definitely feel you on that. On a more hopeful note, more positive note, you are a girl dad,
Yes. A double girl dad. I
a
have
double girl dad.
twin daughters. Yep.
Yeah, and you know, like big picture, this podcast is about masculinity, but I do think that it's important to, it's for everybody, and I do think that part of masculinity is how we interact with the non-masculine people in our lives,
Hmm.
right?
Hmm.
So, what would you say is like the coolest thing about being a girl dad?
That's I think I never wanted boys, first of all.
Really?
Yeah, I've
Okay.
never I always saw little boys as being too high energy for me. So I think the greatest thing is just seeing how just cool girls are. Just laid back for the most part. My girls throw tantrums left and right. Don't get me wrong, throughout the years, but there's just a cool energy of being, girls and just a beautiful thing of being a girl dad. But and there's a lot to grapple with too. I have two of my closest friends that were part of my quote unquote 9P crew that would hang out and do the pregame at my Chelsea apartment. They have both of them have two boys. So we often commiserate and talk about fatherhood and there's things that are different. I mean, my girls go to their mom a lot for a lot of
Okay.
things, and it makes sense, right? That they see themselves in their mom. So there's sometimes I feel like there's a disconnect. Whereas my two close friends that have boys, you know, they are looking up to them in a different kind of way. So, but I think at the end of the day, what's important is that these girls and what when they are now they're 14, they're becoming women to have a strong positive relationship with their dad is going to be so important to them as they navigate their own lives and their own relationships. So, you know, I don't try to take offense to the fact that they're definitely go to their mom for many things, and she's an incredible human being, so it makes sense. And I'm just going to be there when they need me. Dad, give me a ride here, give me a ride there, or Dad, how much money do I have in my account? Like I'm going to be there for them in whichever way, whatever facet they need me to be there for them. So,
That I love
yeah.
that, man. I
Thank
love
you.
that.
Thank you.
Quick question, just like a nerdy vinyl nerd question. Top 3 record stores in New York City.
So my favorite is Human Head Records
Shout
in
out Travis.
yeah. And Sean Dubb, I think, is still there.
I haven't been there in a minute, actually. It's been like a year since I've been to
I
Human
try
Head.
not to go because I spend too much money.
Yeah, man.
So like my favorite places are places I don't frequent that much because I when you know that you have an addiction, you have to curb your addiction.
You are absolutely right.
So, and there's only so much that I can allot myself a month to spend on records. But I to answer your question, Human Head Records, number one. I love A1. To me, that's number two. And I'm gonna say a number three that doesn't exist yet, but there's a shop that's opening around the block from Bierwax called Very Friendly, and they did a quick pop up at Bierwax, and he brought a few boxes. This guy's name is Mike, and his
Say
his
word.
partner, and bought a few boxes of 45s, and I found a whole bunch of stuff. So I know for a fact that it's going to be an amazing space on Dean Street, right around the block from Bierwax. So I'm gonna put them preemptively number
At
three.
number 3,
Yeah,
I mean, I need a record store closer to me, like I need a hole in my head,
exactly.
but they're on they're
They're gonna be
on
opening
the
soon. Yeah,
yeah, my boss follows them,
sure.
interesting.
Oh, look at that.
Yeah, okay.
You know the other one that's really dope. If I could actually, a third one that actually
Plug another
exists
one, yeah.
it's just called Record Shop in Red Hook.
Record shop is dope too.
Yeah, yeah.
Yes.
So I've definitely caught some good things over there. So
Nice.
yeah, and the owner is the kind of is like, oh, he looks at the record, oh, he'll just price it on the spot. It's often pretty decently priced. So I
Yeah,
appreciate that. So
yeah, and in New York City, where everything is jacked up, you appreciate people who are fair
yes.
and
Yeah.
judicious with their record pricing.
Th- Oh yeah.
Go ahead.
I was
Go
gonna say
ahead.
on the flip side, I was in Philly recently and I was like, let me go to a spot that has like stores close to each other. And two out of three were those stores that everything is brand new. Nothing is less than $40. It's all like represses of everything. I was like, this is not record digging. This is not record hunting. This is like going to freaking,
You
IKEA or something,
right. Yeah,
Like,
Hot
so,
Topic or Urban Outfitters.
yeah, I was like,
Yeah.
no. So I literally I spent all of 2 minutes, went to the next, same thing, and then I went to a third, and I was like, all right, now I can get my hands
This is
dusty.
my spot. Yeah.
This is more like it. So
Yeah, man.
yeah,
Yeah, I mean, got to appreciate the digging. Like it's kind of a lost art because now we got Discogs and all this
yeah,
other
yeah,
stuff.
yeah.
But like going into a basement or like whatever and just like flipping through shit and your hands are like black.
Oof, yeah.
Yeah. There was this
That's
spot in Greenpoint.
the
It's
thing.
closed now, I think. The thing.
Yes. Oh
Yeah,
my
man.
god. Is it
And
closed?
I mean, last time I was there was pre-pandemic, so
Okay.
I assume so, but I'm not 100%
Mm.
sure. But I remember like going down there, going downstairs, like hanging out in there for like 2 hours. You come out, it's like need a
Y
shower
you do. Oh
afterwards.
my god, but and the thing is, it's like, it's so much junk, but it's everything was $2, right? So it's like if you spend 2 hours and if you find 5 records, it's worth it.
Yeah, because you only spent $10.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So yeah, I love that. I
Yes.
love that. That's my favorite kind of digging.
Yes. Me too. Me too. So to wrap up, I always ask my guests to come up with a question to ask me. But before I hit you with that, I do want to hit you with this real quick, and I might cut this out at some point. But my dad is also from Georgetown.
Wow, yeah.
So
That's incredible. How many like connections and synergies? That's freaking amazing. I love it.
yeah,
I love
it's
it.
pretty awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. Now I'll put you on the spot.
Yes. So first of all, I love the mission of the pod. It's super dope.
Thank you.
What I kind of share one of my kind of like formative negative experiences that kind of shaped and shifted my worldview or my life. Like, what is one of those things from back in the day for you that eventually planted the seed for your podcast?
I don't know if I can point to one specific thing. I've always been kind of an observer. And I also think I've always been somebody who is very, what's the word I'm looking for? Like reflective,
Mm,
kind of. There has never been a point in my life when I have not felt like a guy or a man or a boy or whatever it is.
mm-hmm,
But, you know, growing up, certainly in high school and even, through my 20s, there were times when because I was a little bit more reflective, because I was maybe considered a little bit more sensitive, like all of that stuff, it was like, oh, dude, like, there were times when other people might have called my masculinity into question.
mm,
And there are times when maybe I called my own masculinity or just was confused about like, what is this?
mm,
But I've always been interested in kind of exploring myself, exploring other people. I've always been super, super interested in other people's stories. I think how we grow is through learning about others' experiences and gaining empathy
mm,
through that. One thing, actually, to circle back to something to your experience, I think having the experience that you had, as traumatic as it was, where you were dropped into a culture that wasn't yours and spent so much time in it, years later as an adult, it makes you a much more like adaptable, empathetic person
mm-hmm,
because you have experiences with all sorts of different people. Like your worldview, I think, is better because, I mean, your worldview isn't better because of a traumatic experience, but your worldview is broader because you've spent time in cultural circles that were not your own.
mm-hmm.
I'm sure you and most of us would prefer that to be by choice rather than by force,
Exactly. But yeah.
but as a kid, we don't have the agency to choose where we end up.
Mm-hmm,
So, I think I can't think of like a specific point in my life. I think I've always just been like a question asker. I've been like,
mm-hmm,
like, why can't I not like this and still be a guy? Why can't I not like this and still be black? Why,
mm-hmm,
it's like all this,
mm-hmm,
all this stuff. So it's just me being a curious person,
mm-hmm.
you know?
Love that.
Yeah. And, wanting to challenge people too.
Exactly.
So I think that's all really important. But,
Mm-hmm,
the thing I love about it now is that I'm able to have these conversations and relate to people and other people hear them and they are like, "Oh shit, there's somebody else who is thinking along the same lines as I am."
mm,
Like, it like I feel heard, it makes other people feel heard and seen, and that's a great thing. And I get to connect with dope people.
mm,
Like again, just like talking to you for the last hour and change, we have so many similar cultural touch
mm-hmm,
points. It's kind of crazy because I don't have a ton of people like that in my
mm,
life.
mm-hmm.
So just because there ain't no real New Yorkers in New York anymore.
That's right. It's right. 100%. That's
Yeah,
so true.
yeah.
That's so
So
true.
yeah. So that's why I do this thing.
That's great.
Yeah, man.
Con Cheers to you. That's great.
Thank you,
It's
brother.
really
Thank
good
you,
work
brother.
that you're doing and great topics and important conversations to be had, with other men, so
Thank you,
amazing.
sir. I appreciate that, and I appreciate you. And let's do this again. We
So
can
this
do
again,
it.
we can do it over a beer at Bierwax and
Yeah,
just or anywhere else,
hip hop book club.
Yeah, oh, that's right. Yeah, let's talk about it. I mean,
Yeah,
I have time, and if I don't know if
yeah.
you have a
Let's
if
keep going.
okay,
Yeah.
so I don't even know how it started, but a few Bierwax DJs, we have like a DM group on Instagram, and we just always talk shit about, an album that came out or this, whatever. Share different, reels or memes. So I don't know whose idea it was, but we just decided that we're gonna read. The first book was Rob Swift's book, The City of Hip Hop.
Hmm.
I think that was what it was called. It was a very academic book. It was on Routledge, and it's a very academic press. And we read it, we dissected it. It was a great conversation. We had a lot of challenging things that we wanted to talk about. We had a lot of critiques of the book, and yeah, we really unpacked a lot. And it's rare, for a bunch of men around the same age to just get together and like, we're always debating hip hop, right? It's a pastime. If you're into hip hop,
Yeah.
you're debating hip hop.
Yep.
You know, you know, the top five and all the other, debates are out there. So it was great to now approach it with a little more seriousness, with a little more of an approach that could be academic, but it's serious in a way that we're able to like have conversations that are rich around something that we consume all the time.
I love that.
Yeah, so the next someone hosts and choose the next book, and then this is the fourth book that we've done right now. So
Okay.
yeah, so it's definitely exciting to be able to engage with these other fellow DJs in a different kind of way, and whoever hosts usually provides the food, and so it's also just a nice escape from our usual routine. So yeah, it's fun. But the Fat Five Freddy book was literally this past Sunday, and we had a blast chatting about it, and
It's such a great book, man.
so good. It's
Yeah.
really really good. So and to me, this was my favorite one out of the ones that we've read.
Okay.
So we'll see what the next one brings.
I mean, there's so much great hip hop literature out there. I just think, Freddie just is so good at like painting a picture with words.
Yeah.
I mean, you can tell that it's like his voice and not
Hmm.
like a ghostwriter's voice or anything like that. And again, just, as someone who does have a little bit of, it's funny. I have like a nostalgia for New York City that I was too young to experience.
Mm.
I used to have our office used to be near the Paradise Garage.
Wow.
And I was like, damn, if it would be so awesome to have been like 10 or 15 years older and
To
have
be
had that
experienced that?
experience.
Oh my
Yeah.
god. And
Yeah.
how he paints the picture of Paradise Garage was like that was the most vivid description I've ever read
Yeah.
or heard of Paradise Garage. And the way he talks about Larry Levan and how he was able to command the crowd. And even just like the physicality of the space. I was like, wow, this seems so damn cool. So yeah, that's one place that I also wish that I had experienced. And I
And
love that era. That's the other thing I love to spin actually is that like late disco, that sweet spot between disco and house music. That
give me that boogie, man.
yeah, that's
Yeah.
my one of my favorite things to spin.
Yeah. I mean, that's my formative memories are like 81, 82. Like my aunts and my uncles
Mm-hmm.
listening to that
Yeah.
music because
Yeah.
they were going to clubs and all that stuff
Yeah.
as well. So I will always, similar to you, have a soft spot for that
Mm-hmm.
music.
Yeah.
Even though I was 6 or 7, so it would have been another 12, 13 years before I would have been able to hit the Paradise Garage. Although it wasn't a bar, so I think you could go if you were 18
That's right. Yeah.
because they only served juice, if I remember
Yeah,
correctly.
that's right.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yep, yep. So when they invent the time machine,
Exactly. Listen, if they do, you let me know.
yeah, hey, we can hit that up together
Hell
for
yeah.
sure. Yeah,
That'll be
man.
amazing.
Yeah. All right, man. Well, let me hit stop real quick on
Cool.
this. So, folks, if you want to know about Bierwax, the easiest thing to do is probably to go and visit it. But if you're not in New York City, not planning on visiting New York City, you can go to beerwaxnyc.com. That is BIERWAXNYC.com. You can follow Bierwax on the social medias. You can go to Instagram.com/Bierwax, follow them there. And thank you, Chris, for taking the time to be on the show. Thank you, Thomas, for making the introduction to us. Go back and listen to Thomas's episode if you have not. And I look forward to talking to you both more and spending a lot more time at Bierwax. And also, shout out to Chris for mentioning Very Friendly NYC, which is the record store that is opening around the corner from Bierwax, and that I plan to spend a lot of time and hopefully not a ton of money in. Thanks again, Chris, for doing the show. Much appreciated. Let's do this again real soon. Thank you for listening to this episode. Please follow me on Instagram at DetoxPodGuy, or actually, don't follow me. Well, follow me on Instagram if you want, but also subscribe to this podcast. Tell your friends, tell your neighbors, tell anybody who you think would be interested in the content of this and all the other episodes. Leave a comment, leave a rating, do all that good stuff. It obviously helps us. You know how the internet works, so it is much, much, much appreciated. Obviously, a million thank yous to our guest and all of the guests who appeared on the show. Please check the backlog of episodes. There are over 200 of them, and there's some really great conversations in there. And thank you for keeping the conversations going, and we'll see you next time.